On July 20th, 1944, a bomb exploded inside Adolf Hitler's military headquarters. The blast killed 4 people and injured many others, but Hitler survived. The man who planted the bomb was not a foreign agent or an Allied spy. He was a decorated German colonel named Claus von Stauffenberg. This was Operation Valkyrie, the most famous attempt to assassinate Hitler from within his own military command. The story of Operation Valkyrie has been told in books, films, and documentaries. Most people know the basic facts. A group of German officers tried to kill Hitler and overthrow the Nazi regime. They failed. The conspirators were executed. But beneath this well-known narrative lie deeper questions that historians continue to debate. Why did these loyal German officers turn against their own leader? How close did they actually come to success? What critical mistakes doomed the operation? And most intriguingly, what would have happened if they had succeeded? The answers are more complex than many realize. The conspiracy involved hundreds of people across multiple countries. The planning took years. The execution required split-second timing, and the failure resulted in one of the bloodiest purges in Nazi Germany's history. Some details remain controversial even today. Historians disagree about the motivations of certain conspirators. Some evidence was destroyed. Some witnesses changed their testimonies. And some secrets died with the executed plotters. In this video, we will examine Operation Valkyrie from multiple angles. We will explore the historical context that led German officers to commit what many considered treason. We will follow the conspiracy as it developed over months and years. We will reconstruct the events of July 20th, minute by minute. We will analyze why the plot failed when success seemed within reach. And we will consider the brutal aftermath that claimed thousands of lives. This is not just a story about one bomb and one day. It is a story about courage, desperation, moral complexity, and the thin line between heroism and futility. To understand Operation Valkyrie, we must first understand the situation Germany faced by 1944. The war that Hitler promised would bring glory to Germany was collapsing on all fronts. In the east, Soviet forces were pushing German armies back toward Poland. In the west, Allied troops had landed in Normandy and were advancing across France. German cities burned under constant aerial bombardment. Millions of German soldiers had died. Millions more would die before the war ended. For some German military officers, this catastrophic situation demanded action. They believed Hitler was leading Germany toward total destruction. They saw the concentration camps and the mass murders. They witnessed the strategic blunders that cost German lives. They understood that Germany could not win the war. Yet Hitler refused to negotiate or surrender. Instead, he demanded total war until the last German fell. These officers faced a profound dilemma. They had sworn personal oaths of loyalty to Hitler. German military tradition emphasized absolute obedience to the supreme commander. Betraying that oath meant betraying everything they had been taught to value. Yet, continuing to follow Hitler meant betraying Germany itself. The conspiracy that became Operation Valkyrie did not form overnight. Resistance to Hitler within the German military began years earlier. As early as 1938, some generals discussed removing Hitler from power. After Germany invaded Poland in 1939, these discussions became more serious. Following the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, opposition grew stronger. But talking about resistance and acting on it were very different things. Several earlier plots had failed or been abandoned. In 1943, multiple attempts to assassinate Hitler came close, but ultimately failed. One conspirator carried a bomb onto Hitler's plane, but the detonator malfunctioned due to cold temperatures. Another planned to shoot Hitler during a military parade, but the event was cancelled. These failures taught the conspirators important lessons about what would be required for success. By early 1944, a core group of conspirators had formed. They included high-ranking officers, government officials, and civilian leaders. They represented various political views. Some were conservatives who wanted to restore traditional German values. Some were socialists who opposed Nazi ideology. Some were motivated by religious faith. Some were motivated by practical concerns about Germany's survival. What united them was the conviction that Hitler must be removed. The conspiracy required careful planning and absolute secrecy. Discovery meant certain death, not just for the conspirators, but for their families. The Gestapo, Hitler's secret police, was efficient and ruthless. Informants were everywhere. Trust was a precious and dangerous commodity. The conspirators needed more than just Hitler's death. They needed a plan to seize control of the government immediately afterward. Otherwise, other Nazi leaders would simply continue the war. This is where Operation Valkyrie became crucial. Valkyrie was an existing emergency plan designed to maintain order if something disrupted the Nazi government. The conspirators cleverly modified this plan to serve their own purposes. After killing Hitler, they would use Valkyrie to mobilize the reserve army, arrest Nazi leaders, and negotiate peace with the Allies. At the center of this conspiracy stood Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg. He was not the original leader, but he became the most important figure. His role would prove both essential and, ultimately, fatal to the entire operation. Claus Philipp Maria Schenk Graf von Stauffenberg came from an old aristocratic family in southern Germany. Born in 1907, he grew up in a traditional, conservative, and deeply Catholic household. He joined the German military in 1926 and quickly proved himself an exceptional officer. Intelligent, charismatic, and dedicated, Stauffenberg rose through the ranks during the early years of World War II. Initially, Stauffenberg supported the Nazi regime. Like many Germans, he believed Hitler was restoring German pride and strength. But his views changed as he witnessed the reality of Nazi rule. In 1942, while serving in the Soviet Union, he saw mass executions of Jews and other civilians. The brutality shocked him. His Catholic faith increasingly conflicted with Nazi ideology. By 1943, Stauffenberg had joined the conspiracy against Hitler. In April 1943, Stauffenberg's life changed dramatically. While serving in North Africa, British aircraft attacked his unit. The attack severely wounded him. He lost his left eye, his right hand, and 2 fingers on his left hand. Many believed these injuries would end his military career. Instead, Stauffenberg saw them as liberation. His disability gave him a reason to be transferred to positions closer to Hitler. It also strengthened his resolve. He had sacrificed his body for Germany. He would not let that sacrifice be meaningless. After recovering, Stauffenberg received a new posting as Chief of Staff to the commander of the Reserve Army. This position gave him 2 crucial advantages. First, he would have regular access to Hitler at military briefings. Second, he could directly implement Operation Valkyrie once Hitler was dead. The other conspirators recognized that Stauffenberg was uniquely positioned to execute the plan. He became the man who would kill Hitler. The conspirators faced a critical challenge. Killing Hitler was not enough. They had to act immediately afterward to seize control before other Nazi leaders could respond. The plan required precise coordination across multiple locations. Military units had to arrest Nazi officials in Berlin, Paris, Vienna, and other cities simultaneously. Communication networks had to be secured. Key government buildings had to be occupied. All of this had to happen within hours of Hitler's death, or the coup would fail. Stauffenberg attempted to assassinate Hitler twice before July 20th. On July 11th, he carried a bomb to a meeting at Hitler's residence in Bavaria, but Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, was not present. Some conspirators wanted to kill both Hitler and Himmler simultaneously. Stauffenberg did not trigger the bomb. On July 15th, Stauffenberg again carried a bomb to a meeting with Hitler. Again, he did not act, possibly because conditions were not ideal. The other conspirators grew anxious. Each delay increased the risk of discovery. They insisted the next attempt must succeed regardless of circumstances. July 20th began early for Stauffenberg. He flew from Berlin to Rastenburg in East Prussia, where Hitler's military headquarters, called the Wolf's Lair, was located. Stauffenberg carried 2 bombs in his briefcase. Each bomb contained plastic explosive with a chemical detonator. The detonator required crushing a small glass capsule that released acid. The acid would eat through wire and trigger the explosion after approximately 10 minutes. At the Wolf's Lair, Stauffenberg learned that the meeting location had changed. Originally scheduled for a concrete bunker with poor ventilation, the briefing would now occur in a wooden conference building with windows. This change would significantly reduce the bomb's effectiveness. Nevertheless, Stauffenberg decided to proceed. Too much depended on this attempt to abort again. Before the meeting, Stauffenberg excused himself to prepare. In a nearby bathroom, he used his 3 remaining fingers and his teeth to crush the detonator on one bomb. He struggled to arm the second bomb but could not manage it in time. An assistant knocked on the door, urging him to hurry. Stauffenberg abandoned the second bomb and returned with only one armed device in his briefcase. The conference room contained a large oak table covered with maps. Hitler stood near the middle of one side, leaning over the table to examine documents. Approximately 20 officers crowded around. Stauffenberg positioned himself as close to Hitler as possible, placing his briefcase under the table near Hitler's legs. Then he excused himself, claiming he needed to make an urgent phone call. Minutes after Stauffenberg left, another officer moved the briefcase. It was in his way, so he pushed it to the far side of a thick wooden table support. This simple action would save Hitler's life. At 12:42, the bomb exploded. The blast was enormous. It destroyed the building, killed 4 men, and injured many others. Stauffenberg, watching from outside, assumed no one could have survived. He bluffed his way past security checkpoints and flew back to Berlin to implement the coup. But Hitler had survived. The heavy oak table support shielded him from the worst of the blast. His right arm was injured. His eardrums were damaged. His legs were burned. But he was alive, and he was furious. The failure of Operation Valkyrie raises a fundamental question. How did such a carefully planned operation fail so completely? Historians have identified multiple factors. Some were bad luck. Some were tactical errors. Some were fundamental flaws in the conspiracy itself. Understanding these factors helps explain why the plot to kill Hitler ultimately proved futile. Theory 1. The changed location was decisive. Many historians argue that the change in meeting location was the primary cause of failure. The original plan called for the briefing to occur in Hitler's concrete bunker. The bunker's thick walls and lack of windows would have contained the blast, directing all force inward. In such confined space, even one bomb would almost certainly have killed everyone present. The actual conference building, by contrast, was a wooden structure with multiple windows. When the bomb exploded, much of the blast force escaped through these windows. The pressure wave dissipated rapidly. This reduced the explosion's lethality significantly. Supporting this theory is the fact that while 4 men died, most people in the room survived despite being close to the blast. However, critics note that Stauffenberg had only armed 1 bomb. He carried 2 but failed to prepare the second due to time constraints and his physical disability. If both bombs had detonated, even in the wooden building, Hitler might not have survived. The location change certainly reduced effectiveness, but it was not the only factor. Credibility level high. The physical evidence strongly supports this explanation. Theory 2. Moving the briefcase was the critical error. Another compelling theory focuses on Colonel Heinz Brandt's action. Brandt moved Stauffenberg's briefcase from its original position near Hitler's legs to the far side of the heavy oak table support. This support, a thick wooden beam, stood between the bomb and Hitler when it exploded. The beam absorbed and deflected much of the blast force. Had the briefcase remained in its original position, Hitler would likely have suffered fatal injuries. Brandt himself died from his wounds 4 days later. The irony is striking. His innocent action to move an inconvenient briefcase saved Hitler's life, but cost his own. This theory suggests that without Brandt's intervention, Operation Valkyrie might have succeeded regardless of the location change. Supporting this theory is testimony from survivors. Several officers recalled the briefcase being moved. Medical evidence shows Hitler's injuries were consistent with being partially shielded from the blast. The table support showed significant damage on the side facing the explosion. Critics argue that even if Brandt had not moved the briefcase, the wooden building's structure still reduced the bomb's effectiveness. They maintain multiple factors contributed to failure, not one single action. Credibility level high. Eyewitness testimony and physical evidence support this explanation. Theory 3. Hesitation and delay doomed. The conspiracy. Some historians emphasize that the conspiracy itself contained fatal weaknesses. Stauffenberg's earlier hesitation on July 11th and 15th cost precious time. Each delay increased the risk of discovery. It also created uncertainty among the conspirators about whether Stauffenberg would actually act. More critically, the conspirators in Berlin hesitated after receiving news of the explosion. Reports were confused. Some said Hitler was dead. Others were uncertain. Instead of immediately implementing Operation Valkyrie, key conspirators waited for confirmation. This delay proved fatal. By the time they began acting, Hitler had already communicated that he was alive. The coup lost momentum before it truly began. Additionally, not all military commanders supported the conspiracy. Some refused orders from the conspirators. Others remained loyal to Hitler, even after hearing he might be dead. The plotters had overestimated their support within the military. Their plan required swift, decisive action by commanders across Germany and occupied territories. That action never materialized with sufficient force or speed. This theory suggests the conspiracy was structurally flawed from the beginning. It depended on perfect execution and widespread support. It had neither. Even if Hitler had died, the coup might still have failed due to these fundamental weaknesses. Credibility level, medium to high. Documentary evidence supports this analysis, though it is somewhat speculative. Theory 4. Divine intervention, or extraordinary luck. A less academic but historically notable theory is that Hitler survived through extraordinary luck or, as Hitler himself claimed, divine providence. The accumulation of fortunate circumstances seems almost impossible. The meeting location changed at the last moment. The briefcase was moved. The table support shielded Hitler. Stauffenberg only armed one bomb. Each individual factor might not have saved Hitler, but together they did. Hitler interpreted his survival as confirmation that fate protected him for a greater purpose. He became more convinced of his own invincibility. This belief influenced his decision-making during the final year of the war, often to Germany's detriment. From a historical perspective, this theory simply acknowledges that random chance played a significant role. Multiple unlikely events occurred in sequence, each increasing Hitler's chances of survival. Whether one calls this luck, providence, or probability, the result was the same. Credibility level, low as historical analysis, but psychologically significant for understanding Hitler's subsequent behavior. The most likely explanation combines elements from multiple theories. The changed location reduced the bomb's effectiveness. The moved briefcase shielded Hitler from the worst damage. The single bomb lacked sufficient power, and the conspirators' hesitation prevented them from exploiting even a successful assassination. Operation Valkyrie failed due to a cascade of problems, any one of which might have been overcome, but together proved insurmountable. The aftermath of Operation Valkyrie was swift and brutal. Hitler ordered immediate reprisals against anyone suspected of involvement. The Gestapo arrested thousands of people. Many had nothing to do with the plot, but were denounced by neighbors or colleagues. The regime used the failed assassination as justification for eliminating anyone who might pose a threat. Stauffenberg was executed by firing squad that same evening, hours after the explosion. His last words were reportedly, "Long live sacred Germany." 3 other conspirators died with him, but this was only the beginning. Hitler wanted revenge, and he wanted it to be public and horrific. Over the following months, the People's Court conducted show trials of the conspirators. The trials were recorded on film for propaganda purposes. Defendants were humiliated, denied proper legal representation, and sentenced to death by hanging. The executions were carried out using piano wire suspended from meat hooks. The condemned died slowly by strangulation. Hitler reportedly watched films of the executions. Approximately 200 people directly connected to the conspiracy were executed. But the purge extended far beyond the actual plotters. Family members were arrested under the Nazi principle of blood guilt. The regime imprisoned or murdered the wives, children, and relatives of conspirators. Thousands more were sent to concentration camps. Some estimates suggest 5,000 people died in the aftermath of Operation Valkyrie. The conspiracy's failure had broader consequences for Germany. It eliminated many officers who might have negotiated surrender or resisted Hitler's most destructive final orders. The German resistance movement was essentially destroyed. Hitler's grip on power actually strengthened. The war continued for 9 more months, costing millions of additional lives. Today, Operation Valkyrie occupies a complex place in historical memory. The conspirators are honored in Germany as heroes who opposed Hitler at great personal cost. Streets and military installations bear their names. A memorial stands at the site where Stauffenberg was executed. Yet questions remain about their motivations. Were they primarily motivated by moral opposition to Nazi crimes, or by practical concerns about losing the war? Different conspirators likely had different reasons. What remains clear is that these men risked everything. They knew failure meant death. They acted anyway. Whether one views them as heroes, traitors, or something in between, their courage cannot be denied. So we have explored the mystery of Operation Valkyrie and the failed plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler on July 20th, 1944. We have examined the historical context, the conspiracy's development, the dramatic events of that day, and the theories about why it failed. We have seen how a combination of bad luck, tactical errors, and structural weaknesses doomed this desperate attempt to end the war and save Germany from total destruction. Which theory do you think best explains the failure? Could the conspirators have succeeded with different decisions? What would have happened if Hitler had died that day? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to see more historical mysteries and untold stories from World War II. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.